Well, for folks that are getting a wee bit fed up of the persistent warmth of not only September but October so far, you're going to get a little bit of a taste of winter, or at least something a little bit closer to seasonal this upcoming weekend. Thanks for clicking on to the Thursday edition of Vogan's European Outlook. We're going to look a little bit at the Manjulian Oscillation and what prospects that may have later down the road. So a little bit of medium range speak today, and we will actually be delving a little bit deeper tomorrow with the update number 2 of the winter 2023-24 thoughts. So if you haven't already done so, be sure to hit that subscribe button. There is a lot of exciting content to come even in the next 24 hours. So the Arctic Oscillation is negative at the moment here. It kind of goes, it flirts with neutral, then it goes back slightly negative once again. You notice here that the Arctic Oscillation has been quite up and down really since the middle portion of June, starting off negative, then positive, negative, positive. It's been back and forth right the way through till the current period here. The NAO has been a lot more persistently negative here, as you can see. There's the negative NAO signal from the middle of June, and it has been very, very much negative all the way through till now. We had that positive here, the most positive really since the late winter, early springtime. We only seen a brief spike in the positive, and that was when we had the heat wave conditions, of course, back in the first 10 days of September. And it's going to be very interesting to see this as we go into the later part of October and into November as well. So to get a better understanding, a better feel of really what potentially is going on here, we have to, of course, look at the tropical ocean basins of the Indian Ocean and indeed the tropical Pacific Ocean. And of course, we have got those warm pools, West Indian Ocean. So if we actually have a look and see, it would certainly help, wouldn't it? So of course we've got, this is looking specifically at the tropics, of course, and you can see here the very firm positive Indian Ocean dipole here, warm west, cool east. We've got sinking motion here over the maritime continent. We've got upward motion over the western Indian Ocean basin, and then of course we've got quite a lot of upward motion from the dateline eastwards here. Notice this little spike in temperature anomaly here over the far east equatorial Pacific. What has happened over the last several months has been the Manjulian Oscillation has been relatively weak. We did have an uptick in upward motion over the western portion of the Pacific Ocean during the summertime, and what that did was that enhanced the westerly winds, but it also sent a Kelvin wave, which is a ball of warm water subsurface below the ocean surface. And when you've got this active phase of the Manjulian Oscillation, where you've got all that thunderstorm activity over the western portion of the Pacific Ocean, what that does is it increases the westerly winds. And what it also does is it does something underneath the ocean surface. It essentially actually pushes some very deep warm waters that typically resides around the maritime continent and over the West Pacific Ocean basin. That is why, of course, at this the biggest and strongest typhoons in the planet tend to occur in the West Pacific. We've got a lot of warm, very deep waters over the Western Pacific Ocean here. And what happens is when you've got that pulse of enhanced upward motion associated with an active phase of the Manjulian Oscillation to the east of the maritime continent, what happens is we increase that west to east wind. It drives all that warm waters all the way up against the South American coast. But what happens is we've got Kelvin waves, and I believe, going by some sources, we've seen 6 or 7 Kelvin waves, transit the tropical Pacific, pushing that ball of warm water underneath the ocean itself across the South American coast. And it typically takes about 2 months to do so, to transit from west to east across the tropical Pacific. And then what happens is it slams up against the South American coast, and then it rises to the surface. And I believe one of the most recent Kelvin waves is actually evident right here, as you can see here, off the South American coast here. So we are seeing this mechanism, this balancing act between ocean and atmosphere. There is a Walker circulation associated with El Nino, so of course you've got this build-up of warm water since the beginning of the year. But what happens is the atmosphere then needs to respond to that sea surface temperature profile. And we'll look at this in a little bit more detail in the days to come, because this is going to be strongly associated with the winter and what may take place. But I just wanted to give you that little sample, that little taster of what's going on. We've got the upward motion here over and just to the east of the dateline. That, of course, then forces all that rising air to hit the troposphere and then spread out. And then, of course, where you've got the cold waters north of Australia here, south of Indonesia, you've got sinking motion, so you've got downward motion, and that is essentially the Walker circulation. Now, what actually happens is you've got the sinking motion here over Indonesia and Australia. That is, of course, associated with drought and heat, but you've also got rising air over this warm waters in the western portion of the Pacific. Indian Ocean, sorry. This is a phase 1 Madden-Julian oscillation when you've got upward motion over the West Indian Ocean basin, and you've also got upward motion over the central portion of the Pacific. This is important. As we go forward, this can then release heat northwards, affecting the strength of the jet stream, affecting buckling of the jet stream, and if you tend to get the Madden-Julian oscillation into phases 7, 8, and 1, which it looks as if there's a possibility. If we look at this diagram here, this is the phase diagram, and we've been quite weak in the Madden-Julian oscillation up until now. But you notice here that we've kind of been floating around the warm phases of 4, 5, and 6, and then we're starting to creep out of the null phase. When you get out of this circle here, this within the circle itself, this represents quite a weak Madden-Julian oscillation signal, and I believe when you've got an El Nino that is continuing to develop, this can dampen down the effects of the Madden-Julian oscillation, which of course circumnavigates the tropical planet. But when you've got this coming out of that circle, out of the null phase, it increases the potential of amplification. So it's increasing the release of heat out of the tropics northward, and if you get it in the phases 8, 7, and 1, or 8 and 1, should I say, this correlates then to the this type of setup here. Let's have a look and see the various phases. So you can see here, this is phase 1, so upward motion over the western portion of the Indian Ocean. Phase 1 also in the Pacific. So 8 and 1, upward motion over the Nino region 3.4 can correlate to a negative North Atlantic oscillation here. You want to have these, the Madden-Julian oscillation in the Western Hemisphere. So, in other words, rising air over Africa, over the west portion of the Indian Ocean, and over the central portion of the Pacific. Now, if that El Nino continues to strengthen, I wasn't anticipating talking too much about this because I'm wanting to save it for the actual winter setup itself. This is the Walker circulation here, and this is the situation over the Indian Ocean when you've got that positive IOD signal here. So you can see the circulation in this diagram here. So you've got the rising air over the western portion of the Indian Ocean. It hits against the troposphere at the top of the troposphere at the tropopause, and then crosses over the top and then sinks down over this colder waters, and it increases a stronger than average easterly wind over the Indian Ocean, and that is exactly what we've been seeing taking place here. Now, if we look at this here interesting diagram here, this is quite interesting. So when you look at 60 east, 120 east, this here essentially is the Indian Ocean, and you've got that very strong east to west flow at the surface, or 850 millibars, so about 5,000 feet above the ground. You've got this strong easterly anomaly representative of the positive Indian Ocean dipole. Then as we skirt further west over the western portion of the Pacific, you've got these red blobs representing phases of the Madden-Julian oscillation. So back in July and early August, we had these strong westerly anomalies here, representing that the Magellan Oscillation was in the west and central portion of the Pacific. Then it died a death, second half of August through a good part of September. We've got these easterly anomalies representing that the inactive phase of the Magellan Oscillation was present over the western portion of the Indian Ocean, the Pacific Ocean. But notice here, as we go towards the recent time, we've got these westerly wind anomalies returning once again. That shows that the Magellan Oscillation is back present over the western and central portion of the Pacific Ocean. But this also could be a telltale sign of the coupling of the El Nino signal here as well, the El Nino base state. So I just wanted to show you a little bit about that, because that, like I've said before, has mega implications. Now, the modelling is having the Magellan Oscillation in favourable phases 8 and 1. What does that mean when we look at the situation here? So if you look at this article here and look at the phase diagram, but also where those phases represent in terms of our weather, you see here a phase 7 and 8 represents northerly blocking, Greenland high pressure, and a negative NAO signal. Now, in the winter, this would correlate to a cold UK winter. Even phases 1, high Iceland, low Europe, and that would also represent a fairly chilly overall situation here. Now, to put this in a little bit more context, let's have a look and see what the ECMWF weeklies are representing. And over the next 30 days, notice where the high is positioned here. Now, of course, we'll have to take into consideration there is slightly different parameters for the type of a month or the type of season that you're in. So phases, 7, 8, and 1 can have slightly different implications on the upper pattern, in the autumn time versus the early or middle portion of the winter, or even the later part of the winter. But this is the mean sea level pressure anomaly of the ECMWF weeklies for the next 30-day period. So this is the 11th of October through the 10th of November. And notice where the positive is showing up. And this is almost perfectly correlating to that phase diagram with the Magellan Oscillation. We've got that negative extending from North America all the way to Southern Europe. Notice the negative heights are further south. And we've got positive between the UK and Iceland up into the Arctic region here. So this is indicating that it is sniffing out the possibility of a correlation between the MJO and the high latitude pattern here. As we continue to play through this loop, this is taking us into the middle portion of October through the middle part of November. Look at where the high is going, folks. It's going up towards Scandinavia here. This is still a long way out, but this is very interesting and also would represent a fairly chilly overall theme here. So let's have a look at the temperature anomalies here for this. Let's go to the 7-day increments here and show what it's indicating here. So this is, of course, overlooking the northern hemisphere here, and it isn't necessarily representing anything particularly cold, but you notice here the amount of warmth up across the Arctic region here. Is it indicating anything particularly cold? Not necessarily here. This is the period day 3 through 10. Of course, we've got cold coming down from the north as we go through the weekend here, and then the focus of the cold shifts slightly east over Europe here. Let's have a look at the European view. It would actually make it a little bit easier rather than having to sit like that with your head tilted. But there's an interesting correlation here showing up in the models between the Magellan Oscillation, the favourable phases, and for high latitude blocking. And then if you look at the NAO, of course, it is indicating that we continue with this negative NAO signal. Now, a lot of the time when these negative NAO summers take place, we need to pay attention. You correlate this along with the El Nino, the Indian Ocean Dipole, polar vortex. All these things is very, very interesting to look at. This, by the way, is the CFSv2 500 millibar geopotential heights for the month of November, and it's indicating a negative NAO and a negative Arctic oscillation with a suppressed jet further south. Isn't that very interesting given what I just said with regards to the Magellan Oscillation and the various favourable phases for cold? So we'll watch this space. A long way to go here But I would certainly encourage you to stay tuned here. Winter update number 2 coming up tomorrow, so stay tuned for that. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. See you again tomorrow with more. Bye for now.